The United Nations General Assembly is about to consider a new Spanish-led draft resolution on the situation in Gaza. This is the scene at the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Gabriel Elizondo is at the headquarters there, joins us from there live. So, Gabriel, all indications that this resolution is going to pass?
Yeah, that's right. There's really no suspense as far as that's concerned. It will pass. It will get the two-thirds majority that it needs to pass. That is pretty much a certainty. What will be interesting to watch is to see how many member states do vote for it. We expect, based on previous General Assembly resolutions, that the number will be somewhere around 150 or higher. And the reason I say that is because this is not the first time that the General Assembly has taken up a draft resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. This is actually the fourth time since October 7th, 2003. The most recent was December of last year, where a General Assembly resolution passed overwhelmingly with 159 countries voting for it meaning a ceasefire and an increase in a demand for an increase in humanitarian aid into Gaza. So we'll be watching closely what these numbers are, but clearly the big picture is here that the General Assembly, which represents all 193 member states of these United Nations, clearly frustrated with the continual vetoes in the Security Council by the United States, vetoes of Gaza ceasefire resolutions in the Security Council. So now they're coming once again here to the General Assembly to take up this draft resolution that was authored by Spain.
And as you pointed out, there have been several General Assembly resolutions calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. How does this one differ, Gabriel? Take us through the text.
Yeah, that's a very good question. This is the text here. It's about 7 pages long. It's pretty long. It's got a lot in it here. It's really a catch-all, if you will. It talks about demands for an immediate ceasefire, the release of hostages, condemns the use of starvation as a weapon of war, calls for the full backing of UNRWA. These are just a few of the things in here. But we've heard these in previous drafts as well. What's different about this one is really paragraph 10, and it's calling for and demanding accountability for Israel. It says that the need for accountability to ensure that Israel respects international legal obligations. And this is a key line here. It says it calls on all member states, either individually or collectively, to take all measures necessary to ensure Israel complies with its international obligations under international law. Now, this is really the first time they're trying to really put some teeth, if you will, behind this resolution, really calling for accountability, because I think that's been the frustrating part for the vast majority of member states, that there hasn't been any accountability when Israel breaks international humanitarian law or other law, for that matter, in its ongoing bombardment of the Gaza Strip. So that was a key line that was negotiated into this draft, and more than 30 nations have been co-sponsors of this draft resolution. So it'll be very interesting to see what the final vote total is once it transpires here at the General Assembly Hall behind me.
And we should point out, of course, Gabriel, this is a General Assembly resolution, not a Security Council resolution. So with that in mind, what actual real impact is it likely to have on ending the conflict?
Well, this is the fourth ceasefire resolution by the General Assembly. The 3 previous ones also called for a ceasefire, and you can see that Israel has ignored that. It has not transpired. Now, here in the General Assembly, the positives of the General Assembly, if you will, are that you get a full accounting of all 193 member states. So it really is a full vote, if you will, of world opinion, which means something. That has a lot of weight that can be put behind it. But the problematic part about General Assembly resolutions are, unlike Security Council resolutions, they are not binding under international law. So that is where simply Israel could, in theory, just ignore whatever comes out of the General Assembly hall here in the next hour or so. And most likely, based on previous examples, Israel most likely will ignore this resolution, most certainly vote against it. But listen, it's still very important, and we'll get a chance not only for a vote, but also there's over 80 member states that plan to speak here this afternoon. So we'll get a sense of what they have to say as well. So it's a much more plurality of world opinion on the genocide in Gaza, and not just the opinion, if you will, of the 15 Security Council members.
Gabriel,
and also,
I'm going to jump in because I believe they're starting to speak now at that session at the General Assembly. Let's listen in.
Unconditional and permanent ceasefire in Gaza respected by all parties. 2, the immediate, dignified, and unconditional release of all hostages held by Hamas and other groups. And 3, the immediate and unconditional lifting of all restrictions on the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza and its safe and unhindered distribution at scale, including by the United Nations and humanitarian partners throughout the Gaza Strip. After 20 months of war, the horrors in Gaza must end. Despite the urgency, the Security Council remains once again paralyzed on this issue, unable to fulfill its responsibility for maintaining international peace and security. And once again, the General Assembly is called upon to take the lead in addressing the unacceptable and catastrophic situation in Gaza. It is unacceptable that the killing of innocent civilians, including women and children, persists with no end in sight. It is unacceptable that hostages continue to be held. It is unacceptable that civilians are willfully deprived of food, water, and medicine, and that they continue to be forcibly displaced. Today, the General Assembly is called upon to act. As representatives of the international community, we must translate our commitment to the Charter of the United Nations, to international law, to justice, and to the dignity and worth of every human being into meaningful action on the ground. These values are not simply ideals. They are the very foundation of hope and peace. Together, we must work to finally end the horrors in Gaza. We must start building a better future where the peoples of Palestine and Israel can live in peace, security, and dignity in their sovereign and independent states. Next week, member states will have an opportunity to showcase their resolve in realizing that promise at the high-level International Conference for the Peaceful Settlement of the Question of Palestine and the implementation of the two-state solution. Let us not forget that the two-state solution is based on Resolution 181, adopted by the General Assembly in 1947, 78 years ago, and reaffirmed by many other resolutions. I call upon all delegations in this hall today to do the utmost to lay the groundwork for the two-state solution. It is the price for durable peace and security between Israel and Palestine. The time to act is now. I thank you. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Spain to introduce draft resolution A/ES10/L34 revision 1.
Señor presidente, tengo el honor de
I
presentar
have
el
the honor
proyecto
to
de
introduce
resolución
draft resolution A/ES10/L34/Rev1, entitled Protection of Civilians and Upholding Legal and Humanitarian Obligations. Firstly, I would like to thank all of the co-sponsors for their support for this important initiative, which the President of the Spanish government, Mr. Pedro Sanchez, announced before the Spanish Parliament on the 7th of May last, with the aim of the General Assemblies of the United Nations stating its view with regard to the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza. Spain, together with Palestine, has been working on this draft resolution, which demands that the parties to the conflict comply with their obligations under international law, including international humanitarian law, and demands likewise the immediate and permanent facilitation of full, rapid, safe and unhindered entry of humanitarian assistance at scale in Gaza, including food and medical supplies, fuel, equipment, shelter and access to clean drinking water. In this regard, the draft resolution welcomes and expresses support for the United Nations coordinated plan to resume humanitarian aid deliveries to Gaza. The text also underscores the obligation of the parties to an armed conflict to respect and protect the civilian population and to exercise constant care to ensure that they spare civilian objects, particularly calls upon all states to respect and protect humanitarian personnel, United Nations personnel and associated personnel, medical personnel, as well as humanitarian personnel exclusively engaged in medical duties, their means of transport and equipment, as well as hospitals and other medical facilities. The draft resolution underscores the commitment to the two-state solution with the Gaza Strip as part of the Palestinian state, firmly rejects any attempts at demographic change in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, and condemns all plans of individual or mass forcible transfers, as well as the deportations of persons protected in the occupied territory. The text also demands an immediate halt to settlement construction, expansion, land confiscation, home demolitions, forced evictions, and settler violence in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and calls for immediate and concrete measures to preserve the territorial integrity of the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem, and towards unifying the Gaza Strip with the West Bank under Palestinian Authority. Mr. President, as a matter of urgency, the international community must launch a robust message with regard to the situation in Gaza, and we strongly encourage all member states to vote in favor of this draft resolution. Finally, Mr. President, I would request that the debate be suspended at 4 p.m. in order to proceed to the adoption of a decision on draft resolution A/ES10/L34/Rev1, on the understanding that the debate will resume immediately following the adoption of the decision, and that the 10th emergency special session will only be temporarily adjourned following the conclusion of the debate. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Spain. The representative of Spain has moved that the debate on agenda item 5 be suspended at 4 p.m. for the Assembly to proceed to the consideration of draft resolution A/ES10/L34/revision 1, and that the debate would continue after the action on the draft resolution. It is my understanding that without setting a precedent and given the urgency of the issue, if the Assembly were to decide to suspend the debate at 4 p.m. for the Assembly to proceed to the consideration of draft resolution A/ES10/L34/revision 1, and to continue the debate after the action on the draft resolution, and if the Assembly were to adopt the draft resolution subsequently, the 10th emergency special session would be adjourned temporarily following the conclusion of the debate on item 5. Is there any objection to the motion? I hear no objection. It is so decided. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Observer State of Palestine.
Mr. President, I thank you for your swift response to the request made by the chairs of the Arab Group and the OIC for the resumption of the 10th Emergency Special Session of the General Assembly. This request was made following the veto cast by the United States on the 4th of June on the draft resolution submitted to the Security Council by the elected 10 members of the Council, the E10, and supported by 14 Council members, demanding an immediate ceasefire, the lifting of Israel's blockade on humanitarian access, and the restoration of all essential services to the Palestinian civilian population in accordance with international humanitarian law, and the release of all hostages as the Council demanded previously in resolution that regrettably remain unimplemented with grave consequences. Mr. President, the distinguished delegations, we meet here on the 614th day of a full-fledged assault against the Palestinian people. And as we continue all efforts to mobilize the international community to take the requisite actions to put an end to this genocide, we thank Spain and the members of the core group for their sense of urgency and responsibility in putting forward this draft resolution that once again clearly spells out the international community's stance in favor of a permanent ceasefire, release of hostages and prisoners, unhindered humanitarian aid at scale throughout the Gaza Strip, and the full withdrawal of Israeli forces. This draft resolution stresses Israel's obligation as occupying power to ensure that humanitarian aid reaches all the population in need, and demands the immediate and permanent facilitation of full, rapid, safe, and unhindered entry of humanitarian assistance at scale, including food and medical supplies, to and throughout the Gaza Strip, and its delivery to all Palestinian civilians, as well as fuel, equipment, shelter, and access to clean water in accordance with international humanitarian law, with full respect for the humanitarian principles of humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence, in coordination with the United Nations. The text strongly condemns any use of starvation of civilians as a method of warfare and the unlawful denial of humanitarian access, and stresses the obligation not to deprive civilians in the Gaza Strip of objects indispensable to their survival, including by willfully impeding relief supplies and access. And while this language is the strongest to date on these matters, Israel's continuing disregard and blatant contempt for the rules of international law, the resolutions of UN bodies, and the positions of states around the world must lead to the translation of this language into resolute action, and it has to be done now. No arms, no money, no trade to oppress Palestinians, ethnically cleanse them and steal their land. Use the tools available to you, each and every one of you in your national capacity, and as an institution, General Assembly and other parts of the UN. These tools, the political, diplomatic, legal, economic tools to hold accountable those responsible for these crimes and atrocities against an entire people, the Palestinian people. Wait no longer. We cannot every day count every day in hundreds of Palestinian lives lost. This illegal, immoral situation cannot continue. It has to stop, and stop immediately. We thank all those who are mobilized to end this horrific tragedy, governments and peoples from across the globe who are standing up for humanity and the defense of the entire nation of Palestine. Israel must end its war and its siege against the Palestinian people, where over 2 million people have been subjected to relentless bombardments, wanton destruction, and engineered starvation, deprived of food, water, electricity, and shelter, stripped of any sense of human security and human dignity. Israel must abide by international law. It cannot remain the exception to every rule. There must be an end to its impunity. We welcome that the draft resolution clearly stresses the need for accountability in order to ensure Israel's respect of international law obligations, and in this regard, calls upon all member states to individually and collectively take all measures necessary in line with international law and the Charter of the United Nations to ensure compliance by Israel with its obligations. It is the states assembled here, all of you, who through their actions, by translating their legitimate outrage into rightful deeds, can end this horrific reality. Mr. President, let me conclude by saying the following. We want to see life prevail. We want to see freedom prevail. We want to see international law prevail. We want to see peace prevail. We reject all attacks against civilians, whether Palestinians or Israelis. We want to see an independent and sovereign state of Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital, living side by side with Israel in peace and security. We want to end this illegal occupation and this prolonged conflict for once for all, in accordance with international law and the relevant UN resolutions. Enough bloodshed and enough suffering. It is not with more massacres and more occupation and more displacement and more annexation that this conflict will end. It is by breaking the cycle of violence through the fulfillment of our fundamental rights and the achievement of shared peace and security that we will bring this conflict to a close and bring healing and justice for all its victims. The actions you take today to stop the killing, displacement, and famine will determine how many more Palestinian children die a horrific death. The actions you take today will determine if Palestinian children ever get a chance at life. We count not only on your vote, but also on your deeds to make sure our actions matches our words. We have the actual power to deter the continued commission of atrocities and to uphold the tenets of international law and the noble cause of humanity. There is no time to waste. Act now. Save Gaza. Save Palestine. Save peace. And we salute all of you, governments and millions in the streets and trade unions who are taking actions to stop this atrocity and this genocide. And I hope that all of you would vote in favor of the resolution before us. And I thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of the observer state of Palestine. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Israel.
Mr. President, Excellencies, Eitan Horn is a father, he is a husband, a social worker. He is an Israeli who moved from Argentina with his family when he was a child. In October 7, 2023, he decided to visit his brother Yair for the weekend of the holy festival of Simchat Torah. Yair lived in Kibbutz Nir Oz, right by Gaza. On that Saturday morning, Hamas turned a holiday into a day of bloodshed and evil. Eitan and his brother Yair huddled inside the safe room of Yair's home. They texted their family. They tried to stay quiet. Then contact was lost. Hamas released a propaganda video showing the two men starved, beaten, and terrified. They had been tortured and starved in Gaza. Yair was released in the hostage agreement in February, but Eitan remains in captivity. For months, there has been no proof of life, no sign of mercy, only agony. Eitan is not alone. He is one of 53 Israeli hostages still held by Hamas. Each one of them is an entire world. However, this General Assembly has failed to treat them as such. You gather here today not to demand their release, not to call out the terrorist regime. No, today is a vote on a resolution that does not condition a ceasefire on the hostages' freedom, a resolution that refuses to condemn their captors, a resolution that rewards the terrorists responsible for their suffering. This resolution does not advance peace. It does not reflect the truths on the ground. It does not reflect the values this institution claims to uphold. Instead of applying pressure on Hamas, the group that started this war and continues to prolong it, this resolution tries to place all the pressure on us, on Israel, the only party actively working to bring its people home. Colleagues, there is a real credible framework already on the table. It was constructed with the support of the US, Egypt, and Qatar. Israel has accepted multiple proposals under it, each time making painful and hard compromises. Hamas has rejected every single one, every proposal, every opportunity. They responded with not negotiating and keeping silent, because Hamas is not interested in peace. It is interested in survival, delay, and the prolonging of terror. But this resolution in front of you says nothing about that. It does not acknowledge the facts. It does not hold Hamas accountable. Instead, it hands Hamas everything it wants: time, leverage, legitimacy. By adopting this resolution today, you will give Hamas political cover. You will strengthen their hand. And you will tell the families of the hostages that their loved ones are no longer your priority. It must be acknowledged that by failing to condition a ceasefire on the release of the hostages, you told every terrorist organization that abducting civilians works, that holding elderly men and young women in tunnels earns you a seat at the table, that you can brutalize the innocent and still be rewarded with resolutions from the world's highest body. This is not diplomacy. It is surrender. You know what Hamas is. You have heard the stories. You have seen the footage. You know they do not care about international law or your resolutions. They care about one thing: power. This assembly is giving it to them. The hostages have not seen sunlight. They have not spoken to their families. Many have been tortured. Many have been murdered. All of them are being denied the most basic forms of human dignity. Somehow, this institution cannot find the strength to condemn Hamas. Instead, you lecture Israel. You accuse us of collective punishment. You pretend that the suffering in Gaza is disconnected from Hamas's constant atrocities. But let me show you the facts. Meanwhile, Israel continues to deliver humanitarian aid, despite the slander contained in this resolution. Over the past weeks, over 16 million meals have been delivered through the new international mechanism in Gaza, Humanitarian Foundation. It was developed in coordination with the US. On Tuesday, June 10 alone, over 2 million meals were distributed across 3 distribution sites. Only today, 36,000 meals were distributed. This mechanism does what the previous one could not. It stops Hamas from stealing the aid. At the same time, hundreds of aid trucks have entered Gaza in recent weeks, but over 500 trucks are still sitting undelivered inside Gaza because of the UN's failure to distribute on the other side. And yet, this resolution claims Israel, and I quote, is using starvation of civilians as a weapon of war. That is a blood libel. This assembly speaks of balance, but this resolution is not balanced. It draws a false and disgusting equivalence between Israeli hostages and Palestinian terrorists. It compares innocent people held in unimaginable conditions to murderers protected by Israeli legal system with access to food and medical care. How can you do that? To compare these two groups is not just dishonest, it is morally indefensible. It erases the line between victim and aggressor. It deprives the hostages of their humanity. Because Israel values life, we agree to these exchanges, but we will never accept the moral inversion that this resolution represents. This resolution betrays the very people it claims to protect. It undermines real diplomacy. It emboldens those who seek only to destroy. So, esteemed colleagues, allow me to clarify something. If this assembly wishes to maintain even a shred of credibility, if it wishes to be seen as legitimate, if it claims to act with any integrity whatsoever, if it seeks to demonstrate the slightest bit of moral clarity, then any resolution on the situation in Gaza must begin with the following words. The General Assembly of the United Nations is appalled by the atrocities committed in the October 7 massacre. Not difficult to say. The General Assembly unequivocally condemns Hamas for those atrocities, as well as its use of human shields and looting of humanitarian aid. The General Assembly demands the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. Now ask yourselves, why does this sentence not appear in this resolution you are about to vote on? What was so difficult? I asked my colleague from Spain, you negotiated this resolution. Where is the condemnation of Hamas? Why it was so hard? One line, 5 pages you have here. You all read it. One line, condemnation of Hamas. This assembly is not capable of doing it. Let's be honest. I challenge any one of you here in this chamber to stand up and explain why you could not bring yourselves to include a simple condemnation of Hamas. Explain it to your citizens why you must vote for a resolution that looks away from a mass murder, rape, torture, and kidnapping. Explain it to your people why you are trying to erase October 7 from history. It is shameful. Each member state that supports this resolution without a single word of condemnation for Hamas owes its people an answer. Because when you refuse to condemn Hamas, you commend them. You have abandoned the hostages, but we will not. We will fight to bring back each and every one of them, all of them. Those kidnapped from Nir Oz, Tamir Adar, Amiram Cooper, Ariel Konyo, David Konyo, Ronen Engel, Etan Horn, Eliyahu Margalit, Aryeh Zalmanovich, Matan Sanguker. Those kidnapped from the Nova Festival, Uriel Baruch, Elkana Buchbut, Ron Bar-Ratzlevsky, Eviatar David, Guy Gilboa Dalal, Inbar Hayman, Maxim Herkin, Guy Iluz, Segev Khalfon, Bar Cooperstein, Etan Avraham Mor, Yosef Chaim Ochana, Alon Oel, Avinatan Or, Yonatan Samerano, Idan Shtivi. Those kidnapped from Be'eri, Shachar Baruch, Meni Godard, Ofra Kedar, Dror Or, Yossi Sharabi, Ilan Weiss. Those kidnapped from Kfar Aza, Gali Berman and Ziv Berman. Those kidnapped from the Gaza envelope, Muhammad Al-Atrash, Nimrod Cohen, Shai Levinson, Omer Netura, Daniel Peretz. Those kidnapped from Nachal Oz, Matan Engrest, Itai Chen, Omri Miran. Those kidnapped from Nir Yitzhak, Tal Chaimi, Lior Rudef, and all those kidnapped into Gaza, Adar Goldin, Rand Gvili, Bipin Jushi from Nepal, Etan Levi, Tamir Nimrodi, Daniel Oz, and Joshua Lutu Molal from Tanzania. No resolution, no moral failure, no hypocrisy will change the reality. Israel will do whatever it takes to bring our people home. Maybe today, some in this hall have lost their moral clarity, but we have not. That moral clarity guides us to say to the hostage families, אנחנו נחזיר אותם הביתה, את כולם. We will bring them back, all of them.
I thank the distinguished representative of Israel. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Kuwait, who will speak on behalf of the Gulf Cooperation Council.
This is not diplomacy, this is surrender. Words from the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations condemning the assembly, saying this assembly will give Hamas political cover, saying the resolution doesn't hold Hamas accountable and fails to condemn the captors. Before that, we heard from the Palestinian ambassador to the United Nations, Riyad Mansour, calling for an end to Israel's war and siege. He said no arms, no money, no trade to oppress the Palestinians. This illegal and immoral situation cannot continue with innocent civilians being killed. We're watching the live coverage of this session at the United Nations General Assembly, where they're talking ahead of a vote on a Spanish-drafted resolution, a resolution that I think will be now the fifth General Assembly resolution to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. 4 previous ones passed, and the General Assembly is about to vote on a 5th one. Let's go over to Gabriel Elizondo. I believe he joins us live from the United Nations. So a very clear message going out to the General Assembly. Gabriel, just looking at the past ones, as I was saying, it's probably not a surprise if this one passes.
Yeah, that's right. This is going to pass. It needs 2/3 votes for it to pass, and it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that it will get that. Now, you say, how do you know that? It's because we look at previous General Assembly draft resolutions that have been adopted. The most recent one was just December of last year, and it passed with 159 votes, with only 9 countries voting against it, primarily the United States and Israel, and then many other smaller countries, if you will, only 13 abstentions. So we expect this to pass. That's first and foremost. And just to give you an idea of what we expect in the next few minutes, they're going to be speaking, we're told, giving speeches for about another 15 minutes or so. And then at the top of the hour, we are told, is when the president of the General Assembly, Philemon Yang, will then halt the speeches and then go immediately to the vote. We're expecting that at the top of the hour or very shortly after the top of the hour. I just want to address a couple things that the Israeli ambassador said that were at best misleading, but maybe even completely false. He said that nowhere in this draft resolution is there a call for the release of the, in his words, hostages. That is simply incorrect. I looked, I have the draft resolution that's going to be voted on, page 3, and I'll read the words specifically. It says, recalls our demand for the immediate, dignified, and unconditional release of all hostages held by Hamas and other groups, period. So that is in this draft resolution, unlike what was the Israeli ambassador said, and it was in the previous draft resolutions as well. He also pointed out, why doesn't this draft condemn Hamas? Talking to ambassadors, the answer is very simply because this draft resolution is not specifically about Hamas. It's about what Israel is mostly doing in Gaza and has been doing. It talks about all parties adhering to international law, but this is not a draft specifically about October 7, 2023, or specifically about Hamas. It's about the crimes that have been committed by Israel over the last more than 600 days. So some real clarifications that need to be made there, because it was, quite frankly, misleading by the Israeli ambassador, some of the things that he said there. But as you pointed out, the Palestinian ambassador, very strong as well in his remarks, saying We want everyone to vote for this resolution because there can be no exception. Israel cannot go on with impunity. And they say there is no time to waste. We must save Gaza now.
All right, great stuff there from Gabriel Elizondo. Gabriel, we'll probably come back to you a little bit when they start that vote. For now, thanks so much for watching the situation for us there.